Hello, everybody. Again, it's Mary O'Sullivan, and I'm going to read a little bit more from my book today. It's from Chapter 8, Death by Meetings. And I always, as I mentioned, like to start with a quote. So I will start off with one this morning. The hard truth is bad meetings almost always lead to bad decisions, which is the best recipe for mediocrity. So during my 30-year corporate career, I often led meetings, reviews, strategy sessions, etc. In the rather undisciplined work culture that existed, conducting any meeting was often a major challenge. Starting off, I knew I had to outplay the potential meeting attendees because there was always a useless challenge, which I viewed as a stalling tactic. Complaining about the physical location, the time of the meeting, or of the seating arrangements, which had no bearing on the meeting outcome. In a way, people couldn't be blamed because most of the meetings in this culture were totally deadly. Many times I felt as if not only was my brain numbed, but my entire being was becoming anesthetized. It's somewhat confusing until you finally realize that the deadly meeting syndrome is actually real. I'm sure you have sat in a meeting where the attendees regularly committed the 7 deadly sins of meetings. As described in Entrepreneur magazine, the deadly sins of business meetings are meetings that become useless rituals, meetings that are a one-way conversation, meetings with lax leadership, meetings harping on setbacks instead of strategies, meetings that disrupt the most productive hours of your day, meetings held in a bland, boring environment, and meetings that are too formal and rigid. I likened conducting meetings in that environment to the hopeless efforts of Sisyphus, punished by Zeus to roll a boulder up a hill in Hades, only to have it roll back down again in perpetuity. And if you work with engineers, you will find their attitude towards meetings is like being punished by Zeus. Managing them is almost a Sisyphean effort of its own and can be just as complex and confusing as herding cats. Engineers tend to be individualists, as are cats, and not so easy to manage or control. The undisciplined behavior of some of the engineers I worked with was part of the Wild West culture I experienced way back in those days. But do meetings have to be like herding cats or resemble Greek mythology? We can't avoid meetings, but if no one steps up to fulfill a leadership role in these circumstances, how will any meetings become productive? Getting a group under control takes planning and preparation. Good leaders inform people ahead of time as to the purpose of the meeting and distribute the agenda items in advance. And a good leader sticks to the agenda, tabling any off-topic discussions for offline conversations. Imagine you're already going numb in a meeting you thought was to discuss a major program plan, but instead the conversation veered off early onto last night's game or an upcoming concert. You might be tempted to walk out because now you're wondering why you are wasting your time sitting there. A good leader cuts off the irrelevant topic and pulls people back to reality. Leaders can't afford to let people drone on when they are off topic because others begin to feel sedated or worse. The best leaders know how to keep a meeting progressing. They plan the agenda with a finite amount of time allocated for specific topics with an eagle eye on the clock. What happens when, for example, an agenda item about a complex technical issue comes up? A few engineers enter into a detailed debate regarding the excruciating details, and the rest of the team begin checking their watches and scrolling their phones. The meeting has degraded into a debate between 2 or 3 people and nothing else is getting done. Or what happens when somebody decides to bring up last year's budget, which is nowhere on the agenda? What if someone has an old axe to grind and they don't want to, they want to get it off their shoulders? What if one person brings up a previously tabled item and half the room decides to rehash it in a sidebar conversation? Regardless of the circumstances or what outside off-topic unnecessary items come up, the person in charge must interrupt and table these items. Letting people rattle on and on only to hear themselves speak is what gives meeting a bad name and creates dread when people know they have a meeting coming up. And you can read the rest when you get my book, The Leader That You Don't Want to Be. And we are having a book launch event on April 27th. It'll be on Facebook Live, and I hope I see everybody there. Bye now.